Hola, bienvenidos, bienvenidas a esta actividad abierta del seminario Arte y Revolución en Medio Oriente y el Norte de África, organizada desde la Secretaría de Posgrado de la Facultad de Filosofía y Letras de la Universidad de Buenos Aires. Vamos a estar compartiendo a través de este canal la presentación de la película 74, la reconstrucción de una lucha, de Raed y Rania Rafei, así como una conversación con Rania Rafei en relación a las conexiones reales o imaginarias entre esa Beirut como ciudad nodal del mundo árabe y América Latina. La película, que pueden visualizar hasta el 27 de septiembre en el link que está en la descripción de este video, reconstruye la toma de la Universidad Americana de Beirut en marzo de 1974, creando un clima de época propio y recomponiendo debates aún presentes al momento de la filmación de la película en el año 2011. El 74 es un año emblemático en la historia del país y de la región, que podemos enmarcar como el cierre de esa larga década del 60 que comienza a mediados de los años 50 y se extiende hasta el comienzo de la Guerra Civil en 1975. En esos años, Beirut pasa de ser la Suiza de Medio Oriente, como se la llamaba, a ser, como dice el historiador libanés Fawaz Trabulsi, la Hanoi árabe. Cuando a comienzos de los años 70 se instaló allí el liderazgo de la resistencia palestina, la ciudad se ubicó en el corazón de la dinámica política regional y ya desde comienzos de los años 60 era uno de los polos de atracción en términos culturales y económicos del mundo árabe en el marco de la radicalización en el tercer mundo de la mano de una nueva generación de militantes revolucionarios de la izquierda como el Che Guevara o Frantz Fanon, representantes y referentes de la nueva izquierda que tenía un horizonte internacionalista. Beirut fue una ciudad idílica por su espíritu revolucionario, pero también por su apertura y libertades que en otros países vecinos no había, donde coexistían los clubes nocturnos, los cines, los balnearios, junto con una fuerte impronta militante centralizada en las actividades de las diferentes facciones políticas palestinas que atraían además a un gran movimiento de solidaridad internacional que veía en Palestina otro Vietnam. Ligada a esta corriente también había un fuerte y potente movimiento artístico, estudiantil, sindical, que había hecho de la ciudad un escenario privilegiado para desenvolverse y desarrollarse. Beirut era entonces sede universitaria, capital árabe de publicación y periodismo, centro neurálgico del arte, era el corazón de la revolución. Artistas y escritores destacadísimos como el palestino Ghassan Kanafani o la siria Ghada Samman se establecieron en Beirut, pero también, por ejemplo, Rodolfo Walsh, personaje de gran similitud con Ghassan Kanafani por su compromiso militante ligado a la actividad periodística y a la actividad literaria, se instaló también en Beirut por unas semanas para escribir una serie de artículos sobre la revolución palestina, también en ese convulso 1974. Entonces Beirut era de alguna manera este escenario que posibilitaba un intercambio de ideas. Era, como vamos a escuchar decir a Rania Rafei en la entrevista, una especie de película experimental, que era también un polo de atracción militante. Entre los latinoamericanos ya mencionamos a Rodolfo Walsh, pero 3 años antes, en 1971, también los argentinos Jorge Denti y Jorge Giannoni viajaron a Beirut, como muchos otros cineastas del mundo, para documentar la causa palestina. Rodaron allí Palestina, otro Vietnam, emulando la llamada del Che de crear 2, 3, muchos Vietnams. Y es justamente la imagen del Che como materialización de esa utopía que se quiere construir en ese microcosmos que era la Universidad Americana de Beirut en 1974, quien mejor simboliza esa nueva humanidad que se anhelaba desde Bolivia y Cuba, pasando por Argelia, llegando hasta el Líbano y Palestina. Los debates que se generan entre los y las activistas de este docuficción reflejan discusiones aún presentes a casi 40 años después, a través de las reflexiones y preocupaciones de otra generación que, casualmente, también estaba gestando un proceso revolucionario que estalló en diciembre de 2010 en Túnez y se expandió por todos los países de la región, llegando a Líbano en octubre de 2019.
Rania, thank you for joining us in this discussion on your film. My first question would be why you decided to make this film on the struggle of 74 in 2011, and what kind of research did you do for the film?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. It was by coincidence, actually. My brother and I were working on a film for Al Jazeera, a documentary for TV, about the history of student movements in Lebanon. And while he was working as a researcher and I was doing the film, and while we were working on the film, we bumped into this event of 74. And we were doing actually the film in 2010, even before the Arab Spring, but I will talk about this more later. So we were already making a lot of research for Al Jazeera film. When we, I don't know, we became so fascinated with this event when we came to know it. And for us, it represented something, I think, because it was year 74 and it was the year before the war, just 1 year before the civil war of 75 that lasted 15 years. So it was very fascinating for us because we felt that it represented all the dreams, the hopes, the utopia that the left was living and feeling before the war erupted, and in my opinion, killed all this dynamism and all this hope for change. So this is why we decided to make a film, and very quickly we decided to make a hybrid film, saying that we didn't want to make a fiction and didn't want to make a documentary. We wanted to combine both, and we wanted to reenact this film with real activists. And this is where we began the work of preparation of casting with the activists that were in the film. Also, to be quick on the research, there are many layers of the research. One layer is that we brought a lot of documents about the event itself. And there was, as I said before this, the research we did for Al Jazeera. So we were well surrounded with research about the era itself. And then there's the research, the human research, I can call it, the work we did with the activists we casted to reenact the event. And this work was very interesting for us because we wanted them to reenact the past activists. And together we collaborated in creating their characters and what they were going to say. And together, actually, we wrote the film. So this is also a layer of the research that was very, very important. Yes, that's very briefly.
Thank you. So it was possible for you, together with the actors, to reconstruct somehow the struggle. I mean, that's why also you put this in the title, the reconstruction of struggle, I think. So it was possible for you. I mean, you were in this environment of the Arab Spring, whatever that means today. But so you try to reconstruct this struggle in the light of another struggle, and another wave of another generation of people that were trying to change the world somehow.
Yeah, actually, I tell this to my surprise, until this day, we started working on the film and we decided to film the event of 74 because we thought that we belonged to a generation that is very disillusioned and that we didn't have the energy to make revolutions anymore. And we decided to do this film because we thought that we were kind of depressed because we didn't have revolutions. And while we were preparing for the film, the Arab Spring started. So we didn't start making the film with the Arab Spring. We started making the film before it. And this changed a lot in our relation to the film. So first we thought, oh, in the 70s, people were so idealistic. They believed in things, they dreamed. while we as a generation, we're so dead, we're not doing anything. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, I mean, bit by bit, we were witnessing the start of the Arab Spring, and everything shifted and changed, and the project took another spirit. And a lot of people say that this project is a representative of the Arab Spring, but actually it's not very true because it started before. But then it proved very interesting to be thinking around a revolution and uprising in the light of another, exactly as you're saying, because first of all, there's like a kind of a mirroring that the mind does between what was there in the 70s and what's here now. What are the tools people in the 70s worked with, and what are the tools we're working with now? And it's always, I'm not a big fan of nostalgia in the sense of saying that in the 70s it was the golden age and it was better. Maybe it was better, but anyway, we cannot know for real how was it, because we're seeing it from this point. But what I think is always very interesting about the past and the present is looking at them as a whole, as an entity that is a continuation of one body. And it allows you to see things better for the future, actually, because you see the bigger picture. You see the picture that is more complex, that is more layered. And when we were witnessing the Arab Spring, which was a surprise for the whole world, I think, it was good like to glance to the 70s and to remember what was the Arab world, and notably Lebanon back then. And to like make a sort of an echoing of resonance that for me is really very rich and interesting.
Yeah, and also Beirut was like a center, like a nodal city of this global 60s. So it is very interesting to think all these ideas and ideals of the people in the 70s in Beirut, in Lebanon. Do you know, or do you recall how the role of cinema was at the time in the 70s? Because we have, as you said, a very like romantic idea or idealistic idea of the 70s, but another thing is the reality on the ground. So about that time is like how this time was and a short idea, and how it's remembered like for you, for filmmakers, this time of the 70s and the cinema, the flourishing of the arts, of politics, and all this very rich environment in Beirut in the first half of the 70s?
First of all, I want to say that the 70s and the 60s, late 60s, is a very, very special time in the history of all humanity. Because of one main thing, people felt that they were linked together with one cause. Notably, of course, I'm talking about the left. So what was happening in Bolivia, what was happening in Latin America was very important for what was happening in Palestine. Now we lost this, but not to be very long on this idea. Lebanon in particular was very special in the Arab world because for many reasons, it was holding modernity and it was holding new ideas, new possibilities, new platforms of thinking. It was energy-wise, it was really boiling, and it was also allowing for all the Arabs kind of to experiment in this ground. And I would think of Beirut as like an experimental film where all the Arabs would dare do things, because maybe the other countries where I don't know why exactly, but maybe the other countries politically were formed in another way, and it was really possible for Lebanon to experiment things on behalf of the other Arabs. And I think there was a kind really of freedom of thought that was very interesting in the 70s, and it shows in a place like the AUB, the American University of Beirut, was a center for the meeting of those ideas and those new possibilities. So that, of course, and I will say something personal about the cinema in the 70s rather than talk about what was happening. My mother, who is a very, a normal woman, she's not in the arts and she's not in the culture, she used to watch Bergman movies in Beirut in the 70s. She used to watch a lot of author movies. People had another relationship to movies, especially that also, and it's a parenthèse that in Egypt, for example, cinema was, of course, very rich. So also in Lebanon, they had a lot of relationship with Egyptian movies. There was a lot of cinemas in Hamra Street in downtown before the war. I mean, physically also the cinema as a space was really a place that gathered people to think, to see what's happening in the world. And also, I think the filmmakers in this era, the Lebanese filmmakers and also the Arab filmmakers and worldwide, dared to try new things. I think in the 70s, before the war, filmmakers in Lebanon were trying new forms. Aligned with this modernity and possibility of new things, they wanted to try new things. In the war, when the war happened, I think they felt the need to document because there was an event that overtook everything else that was happening, which is the war. And they felt maybe more the need to document. But before this, there was really a need to experiment and to try to see where are we from the cinema, what kind of cinema are we doing, who are we. And I dare say that after the war we are kind of taking over from that place. We're kind of trying to see who are we, what kind of cinema do we do, why do we do cinema, all those questions.
Yeah, also at the time, I think that another question was, what is it cinema? I mean, what kind of, what are we going to use cinema for? You know, like cinema as a tool. So the last question would be that in my work, I argue that new conceptions of femininity and masculinity were built through the revolutionary ideal, and these images and imaginaries travel from one region to the other. Fitting back. So this new man proposed by the legendary icon of the masculinity of the time, which is the Che Guevara, created a new image of the Latin American man, el guerrillero, as we say it in Argentina, an image that has its counterpart in the Arab fedayeen, and we can discuss on this idea also, that were to liberate their lands and their mans from imperialism. So this image of the Che Guevara, and I was surprised the first time that I watched your marvelous film, you know, that I adore your film, that the first thing that this character does when he enters this director's office, he puts this image of the Che Guevara. And somehow the spirit, and not only the image, but also the spirit of Che Guevara is present throughout your film. How do you think this image influenced present and past political actors?
First of all, I think what the image of Che Guevara in my movie, me and my brother, is doing is saying that in the 70s, we perceived as left the world as one. We perceived the struggle as one. And Che Guevara represented the spirit of the ideals, of the utopia people were dreaming about. So we always, in past revolutions, I think, and notably in the 70s, wanted to affiliate the revolution with the image of someone. He was a reference for us. And in my film, we are saying that the students who occupied the American University of Beirut were drawing also the energy and the ideals from this image of Che Guevara, who represented the struggle of the left in the 70s altogether. Now, I think it has changed dramatically, because I think we live in a world now where the first question you ask yourself is, where are you? because if you're in Lebanon, it's very, very different from if you were in the States or in Canada. And I think this is sad for humanity. I think Che Guevara as a man, but also as a symbol, is very important because he made sure how do we say it? He gave us the proof that we wanted one humanity to be gathered. There's another side for it that I think we also lived, it's not all rosy. For me, we also lived in a patriarchal societies. And also we wanted to be affiliated with the image of a man or the image of the father of the revolution. And I think something is also good that today we don't dare to do this. Today there's a refusal to affiliate revolutions notably within an image of one leader and one man, which I think is good. That's why the answer to this question is a little bit complex, I think, and it's not simple for me to convey it because there are two sides for it. So on one side, Che Guevara, yes, he represented this idea of togetherness of humanity in the struggle of the left in the 70s. And now we don't have this anymore. Now I think, especially in the revolution I saw in 2019 in Lebanon, we didn't want to affiliate ourselves to the image of someone, notably a man. In the beginning, there was the image of a woman kicking a policeman, and it was emblematic for the revolution. But then very quickly, I think we didn't want to put it in the box of and affiliated just with the ideals of one man. But I think also Che Guevara for me is a figure that is very touching because also it marks the end of a whole era, of a whole way of struggle and of a whole, if I can say, youth of humanity. It's like, I think the teenage years of humanity, the 70s, where people really really believed in change, really believed it was possible. Now we live in an age where things are more nihilistic, but also very possible. And this era also has its beauty, even though now we might feel it's very dark. So what maybe an interesting question would be, what are we going to replace the image of Che Guevara with? If we are leftists today, if we want to struggle, if we want to change, what do we replace it with? I don't think we would replace it with another image of a person. What we would replace it with which kind of images? And I wanted to say something I forgot about the Fidaiyin. In the Arab world, I think we affiliated ourselves more with the image of Che Guevara more than the Fidaiyin, even though we are very fascinated by the Fidaiyin, but the Fidaiyin at the end of the day, they go to die. Che Guevara was killed. He did not go to die. And here I'm not criticizing the Fidaiyin. I'm just saying that maybe it's healthier, maybe it's more idealistic to affiliate yourself with the figure that wanted to live, that wanted to affirm life, not to struggle by dying. But he was killed. He didn't sacrifice himself.
Yeah, that's why yes. I was about to tell you that in the end, he's also a martyr in the end, his figure. Yeah. But also I was thinking while you were talking, I'm going to make a very difficult question. Like if not the image of Che Guevara, what image would you put in that scene? You know, if you have to choose an image of an Arab leader of the time, what image that would be? I mean, it's like if you put the image of the Che Guevara, it's like you said, it's universal and nobody is going to argue. Yeah. But I'm sure that if you choose the image of an Arab leader, that was going to be complicated among the characters of the film.
I would not do the film if I had to. If a producer come and tell me, listen, hang the the picture of an Arab leader, I would not do the film altogether because, and it's a very intelligent question, because Che Guevara represented ideals, utopia. Arab leaders, all of them, they represent politics. And there's a huge difference between representing ethics, ideals, ideology, and then representing politics. If I put Abdel Nasser, he would represent the politics. And all of them, their politics was not inclusive. It had something, first of all, dictatorial about it. All of them, all the Arab leaders. And second, they were not building to an identity for an Arab, they were building for politics.